Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video. This time to review one of my favorite games of 2019, and that game is Disco Elysium. I played this on the PC via Steam, and as some of you guys may know, I already briefly mentioned this game on my channel since I included it on my list of top games of 2019, and I believe this Disco Elysium finished on 6th place. And at the time of that recording, I was almost done with the game, which I typically don't like that. I usually like to beat the games before I make my full list. But you know, a couple of months later, I was finally able to finish the game, and here I am recording my my review of the game. So it was hard coming up to sit down here and do this video, because it's very hard to talk about Disco Elysium since it's such a unique game and it's so hard to describe it without really spoiling certain things about the game. As usual, I'm not gonna spoil anything. That's one of the I guess features of my channel, that I don't like talking about the story in terms of spoilers or anything. So but I will just be giving a quick brief overview of my impressions and how much I enjoyed this game. So Disco Elysium, yeah, it was released in 2019, developed by Zaum, I think. It's a Estonian studio, and the game was written by Robert Kurvitz. He's also from Estonia, and I have my notes here, so bear with me, guys, because I do have a couple of key points that I want to discuss in the game. So as I mentioned, it's unlike any other game that I personally played before. At its core, it's basically a CRPG, which stands for Computer RPG, a term that used to be exclusive to RPGs that were for computers. Like old school games, like the like the Baldur's Gate games or the Planescape Torment games. But as of late, the CRPG genre, I guess, it's more broad, and it's only a genre in the name itself, if that makes any sense. Because a lot of the modern games, like the Definitive Sin games, the Pillars of Eternity game, those games are not only on computers but also available for consoles. And in fact, a few days ago, this is actually perfect timing for me to record my impressions video on Disco Elysium, but a few days ago, they announced that a final cut version will be released in 2021, which will include console releases for the PS4, PS5, and I think eventually they're gonna release it on the Nintendo Switch as well. So I'm very happy, because console players are gonna be able to enjoy this fantastic game. And going back to the CRPG thing, the game is really a CRPG, but also blended with point and click adventure mechanics, and at the same time it has some investigation / detective mechanics, and also old school like tabletop RPG mechanics, like rolling the dice in order to get past the checks in the game. So a lot of different gameplay styles that are combined into one, including I guess a visual novel as well, because in this game you're going to be reading a lot. And I'm actually surprised at how much I enjoy this game, because I'm not a big reader personally. I don't really read a whole lot of books. In fact, I can't even remember the last book I read. But if you guys enjoy reading books, I think this could be a good one, because there is a lot of text. That's how basically the game controls, if you will. Everything is decision made. You interview a lot of people, you talk to a lot of people, and it's a very interesting way how the game was set up. But going back to I guess the story. The story is very interesting. I'm not going to spoil anything, as I mentioned, but the game takes place in this fictitious industrial, almost like steampunk setting, which is very interesting, in the region of Revachol, which is a region recovering from a war that happened a couple of decades ago. And you can tell that this region of Revachol has still recovering from the effects of war. There's a lot of it's basically a recession going on. You can tell that the economy is not back to normal. There's a lot of social inequality, and the background of that war itself is a very interesting backstory to the game itself. Now, Revachol is in turn divided into several districts, and the game starts in the district of Martinez. I think that's how it's pronounced. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Martinez. That's where the game starts. And the way the game starts is very interesting because you start like butt naked with the worst hangover ever in a hotel room, and your character is just waking up from a hangover, and you soon come to find out you think you're a cop, and you're slowly trying to investigate and figure out what happened, because you're suffering from amnesia induced by the alcohol, basically. So I know that's kind of like a common recurrence on RPGs, especially JRPGs, but this game, trust me, it uses the amnesia angle pretty well, and not in a cringe-worthy way like some other RPGs out there. But the amnesia, actually, it's part of the story, if you will, because you're trying, as you progress through the game, you're trying to find out what happened to you, and you're trying to find out about your past and the present as well, specifically who you are, and so forth. And then soon after the game starts, you learn that you were basically there because you're trying to solve a mystery for a murder case. So you're assigned a partner, Kim Kutsuragi, which will be basically your partner for doing all the detective work for the remainder of the game. And that's basically the story in a nutshell. The game, the story, personally, I enjoyed a lot. Obviously, it's one of the strongest points of the game, if not the strongest, because it keeps the player engaged. In my opinion, the way I saw it, there's like three elements in regards with the story, and I guess also the gameplay of the game, and those are the amnesia aspect, where you're trying to find out what happened to you, and you're trying to find out about your past. Then there's the element of what happens, there's the element of solving the actual murder case, which is you being a cop or detective, and finding out the clues, interviewing people, interacting with all the NPCs in order to get clues, and so forth. And then lastly is the element of your personality, developing the very unique personality and traits for your character. And that's kind of like the fun of Disco Elysium, kind of like building this random, not random, but you have all these different ways of creating your character and the personality, which is a fantastic way that the game treats that. But I'll talk a little bit more about that on the gameplay section. But I just want to briefly touch upon the graphics, which is another of the strongest points in the game. The game features an isometric view, but it features a very unique art style. It's very hard to describe. It almost looks like a hand painted. A lot of the characters in the game, they have just a very unique look that stands out. So it's very hard for me to explain, but I'll have some gameplay footage in this video, so you guys kind of can see what it looks like. But it's a very interesting art direction, very interesting art direction, not only in terms of the universe, the Revachol region, which you can tell that the color palette that they use, it's very appropriate with the game. The game is not very colorful in itself. There's a lot of toned down colors that just provide this like gloom, kind of like perspective, of this devastated area by war and the recession and the social inequality going on in that universe and that the game takes place. And then of course you have the characters themselves, which are pretty nicely created as far as the art direction. As far as the sound, the game has a very minimalistic soundtrack, but it's very appropriate. There's a lot of I guess, good songs in the game when the time is right, and it just speaks for itself how well the game is developed, because there are some certain sound chimes that are just very appropriate. You know, when you accept like an item, or when you level up, or when you pass a white or red check, you know, with rolling the dice. There are some very characteristic sound effects that are just very pleasant to listen to. And then of course you have the voice acting, which is limited in this particular game as of now, but they will have full voice acting for the final cut version that will be released in 2021. So that's very interesting, because the very limited voice acting that's available in the vanilla version of the game, it's simply fantastic. It's a lot of the voice actors are very appropriate for the NPCs they play as. There's this like bratty kid that you meet earlier in the game, Kuno, for example. They do whoever the voice actor was for that character does a great job, because you learn to hate him. You know, he's like this brat little kid that he's giving you a hard time, and that's just one of the examples. So the voice acting is unfortunately very limited, but it'll be fun to see what the final cut version will provide. Although I do have to say that by being completely fully voiced, it could be a challenge, because there is a lot of text in this game. And I guess that's a good segue for the gameplay section of the game, which the gameplay will heavily rely on just reading a lot. You're going to be reading a lot in this game. It's almost like a visual novel in a way. So that's one of the aspects that really surprised me, because I'm not a reader, as I think I mentioned already this previously, but I'm not a big reader. I don't like reading books, but this game, the writing is well done, but at the same time, that makes this game not for everyone. I have a colleague at work that he loves video games, but for example, he purchased this game and he could not get into it at all. Like, he thought the excessive reading in this game was very boring, and he could not get into the game. Now, the reading is not only the only hurdle that you have to get past in this game, because this game really doesn't have any combat, or there's no combat in the game. It's basically an investigation, and interviewing people, and trying to gather clues and so forth. But the reading style, or the writing style in this game, and kudos to Robert Kurvitz, the actual writer. He was actually like a book writer before he became like the lead writer for Disco Elysium. So this guy has a lot of, I guess, background on literature and whatnot. But the writing style in this game is very unique. It's hard to read. That's the one thing that I know it's going to sound like a contradiction, because in an interview, Robert Kurvitz said, he tried to make the game very accessible and easy to read and follow. Which I agree, but at the same time, the writing style is very, it's very heavy and hard. It might be very hard to get used to for people, and by that I mean it's very detailed. When you read or when you interview NPCs in the game, they tell you a lot of backstories that date back to previous years, or they may be talking about other districts or regions of Revachol that have their own identity, and regions that have their own personalities. It's almost like this fictitious world. They're trying to describe the different traits and personalities of the different regions, and the game just goes on tangents sometimes that really they really do a good job of building this universe and world, but you can only enjoy that if you have the time, because the game doesn't go straight to the point. There, as I mentioned, you're gonna have to be reading a lot, and you're gonna have to be very careful when you read, because ultimately, after reading and interacting with the NPCs and characters, you're gonna have to be making decisions, and that's kind of like the next part of the gameplay aspect that I want to touch upon, which is you can like every decision you make in this game has an actual meaning and shapes the character that you ultimately want to be, basically. So you have to be careful in that regard. You can, when the game starts, for example, you can choose between being a thinker or a sensitive person or physical. So you can be like kind of like this intelligent cop from the get-go, or you can choose to be like a very sensitive one, or a physical one, you know, like a drunken physical, kind of like a funny type of aggressive cop, if you will. So throughout the game, you will get points from interacting with people and progressing through the story, and you can use those skill points in 24 different abilities that are separated in things like logic, conceptualization, empathy, authority, reflexes, I think it's another one, electrochemistry, reaction speed, endurance. So you have all these 24 abilities that you have to assign your points to, and I thought that was a very interesting system. At the same time, these 24 abilities are somewhat your party members, if that makes any sense, because as you're interviewing and interacting with people, those abilities will talk to you. They're basically components of your psyche, you know, kind of like electrochemistry or you know, logic. You know, you will have the logic actually giving your thoughts in your head. So they will either try to help you make certain decisions, or they will just provide suggestions. And sometimes you have these elements of your psyche kind of like talking and arguing with each other, which is a pretty cool thing. And depending on how you shape your character throughout the game, those conversations could be different. So you know, that's a very interesting aspect in terms of the psychology of your character, if you will. But there are other elements as far as the personality of your character that you can also develop, such as the political alignments. You can kind of create your character to have a very like a communist view, like, you know, very far on one end of the spectrum. He can also be kind of like a liberal, or you know, the other opposite way to the right, you know, a nationalist, or kind of like in the middle, like a moderate. They call it, I think, a moralist. That's where I personally not to mean to talk politics, but I'm typically very moderate when it comes to political views, and that's kind of how my character wound up shaping as a kind of like a moralist, kind of like in the between. So depending on your choices, you know, you can create your political views or alignments in the game as well, which I thought it was very, very interesting. So overall, guys, Disco Elysium, it's just a very unique game. When you combine all those aspects that I talked about the gameplay, the main elements, you know, figuring out who you are on your character, figuring out your personality traits and political alignments, and then finally solving the case, you know, being a good detective, if you will. It's also part of the charm of the game. It just completes this very unique package of something that, again, I've never experienced anything like this. I never played anything like this. So I thought it was just a very fun, very interesting game, very unique, that, again, it's not for everybody, but the people that have played Disco Elysium, for the most part, have enjoyed it. And it's highly recommended. It's something unique that I think you guys should probably give it a shot. So thumbs up, major thumbs up. Hopefully you guys get to try this game. And free update, by the way. If you guys already own the game on Steam, the Final Cut version will be like a free upgrade. So that gives me I guess a motivation to replay the game, because that's one last thing that I want to discuss is the replay value. There is a lot of I guess motivation for you to go back, because my personality, like I said, he was very moderate, and as far as the cop itself, you know, he was very normal, trying to be polite. I was trying to correct my character, you know, steering him away from alcohol and drugs and all that. So kind of like a good cop, very centered, if you will. But you know, I read a lot of people playing the game as like an a-hole cop, you know, and it's very fun just experiencing all the different ways that you can play the game, all the different dialogues that you can get from the NPCs, and yeah, it's a fantastic game. It took me about I think 38 hours, because even though you can beat the game in, I want to say maybe 25 hours, I did do as many side missions as possible, and I took my time actually reading and trying to create, or trying to go through as much dialogue as possible in the game. I wanted really to get myself immersed in this world, and I'm really glad I did, because Disco Elysium was a fantastic game. Highly recommend it if you guys haven't played it yet. So with that being said, that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.